The warm summer breeze carried the sound of laughter across the pristine beach as the Richardson family enjoyed their long-awaited vacation in Palm Beach, Florida. State Senator Michelle Richardson watched her children build sandcastles while her husband Thomas set up their beach umbrella. After 15 years of public service and countless hours fighting for criminal justice reform in their home state, this was a rare moment of peace for the family. Little did they know that their perfect vacation was about to turn into a nightmare that would spark national outrage and conversations about racial profiling in law enforcement. The day had started typically enough. They'd checked out of their hotel and were heading to a beachfront restaurant for lunch before their afternoon flight home. The trouble began when Officer James Cooper noticed their luxury SUV driving through an upscale neighborhood. Despite the vehicle being well maintained and the family being properly dressed, something triggered his suspicion. Perhaps it was the out-of-state plates, or perhaps it was something more insidious, but he ran the plates and began following them. Thomas Richardson noticed the police cruiser in his rearview mirror and instinctively tensed up. His wife squeezed his hand, a gesture developed over years of similar situations. "Just stay calm," she whispered, though her own heart was racing. Their children, aged 10 and 12, continued playing their travel games in the back seat, blissfully unaware of the growing tension. Within minutes, 2 more police cars joined the first, and flashing lights filled their mirrors. Thomas carefully pulled over, following every protocol he'd learned over the years, hands visible on the steering wheel, movements slow and deliberate. Michelle immediately began recording with her phone, a habit born from years of advocacy work. "Step out of the vehicle with your hands where we can see them." The command came through a megaphone, echoing off the surrounding buildings. The children's games stopped abruptly, replaced by nervous questions and growing fear. Michelle tried to maintain her composure as she explained to them what was happening, all while continuing to record. Thomas stepped out first, following instructions precisely. The officers approached with weapons drawn, a response that seemed wildly disproportionate to the situation. Michelle's hands trembled as she recorded, but her voice remained steady as she narrated the unfolding events. "I'm going to step out now," she announced clearly. "Our children are in the back seat. We're on vacation, and we've done nothing wrong." As she emerged, one officer recognized her immediately, his expression shifting from stern authority to dawning horror. The next few minutes were chaos. More officers arrived, including a supervisor who had worked with Senator Richardson on community policing initiatives. The original officer's aggressive stance quickly dissolved into embarrassed apologies and hasty explanations about a reported stolen vehicle matching their description. But Michelle Richardson wasn't interested in apologies. Standing there on the sun-baked street, her children still trembling in the back seat, she saw not just another incident to add to statistics, but a powerful opportunity to effect real change. Her phone continued recording as she addressed the officers with the same commanding presence she brought to the Senate floor. "This isn't about me being a senator," she declared, her voice carrying the weight of years of similar experiences. "This is about every family who looks like mine, who doesn't have the protection of a title. This is about my children, who should be remembering their beach vacation, not the day police surrounded our car with weapons drawn." The incident might have ended there, with embarrassed officers and angry words, but Michelle Richardson understood the power of the moment. She knew that her position gave her a unique platform to highlight an issue that affected countless families across the country. As other vacationers began gathering with their own phones recording, she continued addressing the officers, turning a traumatic experience into a teachable moment about racial profiling and police procedures. What made this story particularly powerful wasn't just the stark contrast between the officers' initial approach and their subsequent realization of who they were dealing with. It was the way it highlighted how quickly a routine traffic stop could escalate, and how differently the situation might have ended for a family without Senator Richardson's status and experience. As the crowd grew larger and social media began buzzing with uploaded videos of the incident, the Richardson family remained composed, turning their interrupted vacation into a powerful demonstration of the changes still needed in law enforcement practices. Their children watched as their parents transformed a frightening situation into a moment of advocacy and education, showing them firsthand how to stand up for justice while maintaining dignity and purpose. The incident would soon capture national attention, not just because of who Michelle Richardson was, but because of how she handled the situation, with grace, strength, and a determination to use her experience to push for meaningful change in police training and community relations. Within hours of the incident, cell phone videos captured by bystanders began spreading across social media platforms like wildfire. The footage showed the stark contrast between the initial aggressive police response and the dramatic shift in their behavior upon recognizing Senator Richardson. What made the videos particularly powerful wasn't just the confrontation itself, but the composed way the Richardson family handled the situation. The local news stations picked up the story first. Their evening broadcasts led with dramatic headlines about the incident, featuring clips of the senator's impromptu speech at the scene. The Palm Beach Police Department scrambled to arrange a press conference, but they were already playing catch-up to a narrative that was rapidly spinning beyond their control. Back at their hotel, where they'd checked in for an extra night, the Richardson family gathered in their suite. Thomas sat with their children, helping them process the day's events. Their daughter clutched her beach shell collection, collected just hours earlier during what now felt like a different lifetime. Their son, usually bubbling with energy, sat quietly, trying to make sense of how quickly their perfect family vacation had transformed into something so frightening. Michelle was on her phone, fielding calls from fellow senators, civil rights leaders, and news organizations. Her assistant back home had already scheduled 3 major network interviews for the following morning. But instead of jumping into the media circus, Michelle took a moment to sit with her family. "I want you both to understand something," she said to her children, setting aside her constantly buzzing phone. "What happened today was wrong, but how we respond to it matters even more." She pulled them close, feeling their small bodies still trembling slightly. Sometimes the scariest moments can become the most important ones, if we're brave enough to use them to help others. The children listened as their parents explained how this experience, though traumatic, could help bring about changes that might prevent other families from going through similar situations. It was a delicate balance, acknowledging their fear while showing them how to channel it into positive action. Meanwhile, social media exploded with debates and discussions. The hashtag Senator Standing Strong began trending nationwide. What made this incident different from countless others was not just the senator's status, but the way it was documented from multiple angles, leaving no room for ambiguous interpretations. The Palm Beach Police Department's initial statement, released that evening, expressed deep regret for any distress caused to Senator Richardson and her family. But Michelle knew that standard PR responses weren't enough. She spent the evening drafting a comprehensive statement of her own, one that would shift the conversation from a single incident to the broader systematic issues it represented. As night fell over Palm Beach, the Richardson family ordered room service instead of venturing out to the fancy dinner they'd planned. Their son pushed his food around his plate, then looked up at his mother with worried eyes. "Mom, will those officers get in trouble?" he asked, surprising everyone with his concern for the very people who had frightened him hours earlier. Michelle considered her answer carefully. "This isn't about punishment," she explained. "It's about learning and changing. Sometimes good people make mistakes because they're following bad systems. Our job is to help fix the system." The next morning, as the sun rose over the Atlantic, the family gathered in their hotel room to watch the first news coverage together. The story had evolved overnight, with commentary pouring in from law enforcement experts, civil rights activists, and political analysts. But what caught everyone's attention was the viral video of Michelle's impromptu speech at the scene, particularly the moment when she focused not on her own status but on all the families who didn't have her privileges. Local community leaders began organizing a peaceful rally outside the Palm Beach Police Department. The chief of police requested a meeting with Senator Richardson, hoping to discuss immediate changes to their training protocols. But Michelle had a different approach in mind. Instead of meeting behind closed doors, she proposed a public forum where community members could share their experiences directly with law enforcement leadership. Her goal wasn't to shame the department but to create a space for genuine dialogue and understanding. Thomas supported his wife's decisions while ensuring their children remained protected from the growing media circus. He arranged for them to spend the day with close family friends, allowing them time to decompress while their parents handled the mounting public response. By midday, the incident had captured national attention. What made the story particularly compelling wasn't just the dramatic confrontation, but the way Senator Richardson transformed it into a catalyst for constructive change. She wasn't calling for firings or resignations. Instead, she was pushing for comprehensive reforms in police training and community relations. The Richardson family's extended stay in Palm Beach was becoming a powerful lesson in civic engagement for their children. They watched as their parents transformed a frightening experience into an opportunity for positive change, showing them that true leadership isn't about wielding power but about using difficult moments to bring people together. As Senator Richardson prepared for her first major television interview about the incident, she held her family close. "Remember," she told them, "our story is important not because of who we are, but because it shines a light on what so many other families experience without cameras present. That's why we have to get this right." The morning sun streamed through the windows of a major network studio as Senator Richardson prepared for her first national television interview about the incident. The makeup artist noticed her hands trembling slightly as she touched up her powder, but Michelle's voice remained steady as she reviewed her talking points. This wasn't just about her family anymore, it had become something much bigger. The interview began with the now viral footage of the traffic stop, but Michelle quickly steered the conversation away from the dramatic aspects. "What happened to my family isn't unique," she explained, her calm demeanor adding weight to her words. "What's unique is that I have a platform to speak about it. Today, I'm speaking for thousands of families who've experienced similar situations but weren't believed." Back in their hotel suite, Thomas watched the interview with their children. Their daughter clutched her father's hand as she watched her mother on screen, while their son sat cross-legged on the floor, unusually quiet. When the interviewer asked about the children's reaction to the incident, the camera caught a moment of genuine emotion as Michelle's composure briefly wavered. "My children asked me why the police thought we were bad people," she shared, her voice thick with emotion. "How do you explain to a child that sometimes people make assumptions based on how you look? But more importantly, how do we change a system that allows those assumptions to put lives at risk?" The interview struck a chord nationwide. Within hours, families from across the country began sharing their own stories on social media. What made these accounts particularly powerful was how they echoed the Richardson family's experience. Routine moments suddenly transformed into traumatic encounters. The Palm Beach Police Department, facing mounting pressure, announced comprehensive changes to their training protocols. But Senator Richardson pushed for more. She used her position to arrange a series of community forums where officers would sit down with local families to hear their experiences firsthand. The first forum was held in a community center near where the incident occurred. The Richardson children attended, watching as their mother facilitated conversations between nervous officers and community members who'd never had the opportunity to share their stories in a safe space. One elderly gentleman's story particularly moved the room. He described how he still took his grandchildren to school every morning, but always left early to avoid being pulled over, a routine he'd maintained for decades. As he spoke, several officers in the room visibly struggled with their emotions. The impact of these forums spread beyond Palm Beach. Police departments across the country began reaching out to Senator Richardson's office, requesting guidance on implementing similar programs. What made these initiatives different was their focus on human connection rather than just policy changes. Meanwhile, the Richardson children were processing their experience in their own ways. Their daughter started a journal, filling it with thoughts about what happened and ideas for making things better. Their son, inspired by the community forums, suggested starting a kids program where children could talk to police officers in a friendly setting. Thomas, who had initially wanted to put the incident behind them and return home, found himself deeply involved in developing new community outreach programs. His background in education proved valuable as he helped design training modules that would help officers better understand the impact of their actions on families. The media coverage continued, but the narrative had shifted. Instead of focusing on the confrontation, stories now highlighted the positive changes emerging from it. News channels featured clips from the community forums, showing officers and residents engaged in honest, sometimes difficult, but always respectful conversations. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the incident, Officer Cooper, who had initiated the original traffic stop, requested a private meeting with the Richardson family. Michelle was hesitant at first, but something in his letter convinced her to agree. The meeting took place in a neutral location, a small conference room at the local library. Officer Cooper, out of uniform and visibly nervous, brought his own family, his wife and teenage daughter. What followed was a raw, honest conversation about assumptions, fear, and the possibility of change. "I've been on the force for 15 years, he explained, his voice shaking slightly. "And until I saw the fear in your children's eyes, the same age as my daughter, I never truly understood the impact of my actions. I'm not here to just apologize. I'm here to be part of the solution." This meeting became a template for similar conversations across the country. The Richardson family's story was becoming more than just another viral video of police misconduct. It was evolving into a movement focused on understanding, communication, and concrete change. The children's perspective continued to play a crucial role in the narrative. Their innocent questions often cut through the complexity of adult discussions to highlight the fundamental issues. "Why can't people just get to know each other first?" their son asked during one community meeting, prompting thoughtful silence from both officers and residents. As weeks passed, the incident that had disrupted their family vacation transformed into something none of them could have predicted. The hashtag Senator Standing Strong evolved into hashtag Community Standing Together, representing the broader movement for understanding and change that had grown from their experience. Michelle found herself balancing her senatorial duties with her new role as a catalyst for police-community relations reform. But she never lost sight of the personal aspect of their story. Each night, she made time to talk with her children about their feelings, ensuring that their voices remained central to the narrative of change they were helping to create. 1 month after the incident, Senator Richardson stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., addressing a packed chamber. The audience included police chiefs from major cities, civil rights leaders, and families who had shared similar experiences. But what made this gathering different was the presence of officers like Cooper, who had come forward to speak about their own journeys of understanding and change. The Richardson children sat in the front row with their father, watching their mother with pride. Their daughter wore a blue ribbon she had designed, a symbol of the growing movement for police community unity that had sprung from their experience. The ribbon was becoming a national symbol, worn by both officers and community members as a sign of commitment to understanding and change. "Change doesn't happen through legislation alone," Michelle began, her voice carrying the weight of personal experience. "It happens through thousands of small conversations, through listening to each other's stories, and through the courage to acknowledge when our systems need improvement." She paused, making eye contact with her children before continuing. "And sometimes, it takes seeing the world through a child's eyes to understand the impact of our actions." The initiative that had started in Palm Beach was now being implemented in police departments across the country. What made it unique was its focus on human connection rather than just procedural changes. Officers were spending time in communities not as law enforcement, but as neighbors and fellow citizens. Back home, the Richardson family was adjusting to their new normal. Their son had started a youth council that brought together children from different backgrounds to discuss their experiences with law enforcement. The local police department had embraced the initiative, sending officers to sit in and listen to the children's perspectives. Thomas had taken a sabbatical from his teaching position to help develop educational programs for police departments. His approach focused on emotional intelligence and cultural awareness, using real stories, including their own, to help officers understand the lasting impact of their interactions with families. One afternoon, while working on homework, their daughter asked a question that captured the essence of their ongoing journey. "Mom, remember when you said scary moments can become important ones? I think I understand now. It's not about forgetting what happened, it's about using it to help others, right?" Michelle's eyes welled up as she hugged her daughter. These moments of understanding from her children meant more than any political victory. They were learning that positive change could emerge from difficult experiences, a lesson that would shape their perspectives for life. The impact continued to ripple outward. Police departments reported significant improvements in community relations where they had implemented the new training programs. Officers who had participated in the community forums were becoming advocates for change within their own departments. A particularly moving moment came during a national law enforcement conference where Officer Cooper shared his story. Standing before his peers, he described how the incident had transformed not just his approach to policing, but his understanding of community service. "I used to think good policing was about maintaining authority," he admitted. "Now I understand it's about building trust. Every time I approach a vehicle now, I remember the faces of the Richardson children. I think about my own daughter. And I ask myself, am I about to create trust, or am I about to create trauma?" The conference room fell silent as his words sank in. In the audience, several officers nodded in recognition of their own similar experiences. The moment highlighted how one incident could lead to profound personal and professional transformation. Meanwhile, the Richardson Children's School had become a model for positive police-community interaction. Regular visits from officers, not for security but for conversation and connection, had become part of the routine. Students who had once been fearful of police were now engaging in open dialogue. The media coverage had evolved too. Instead of focusing on the dramatic incident, reporters were now highlighting the successful implementation of what was being called the Richardson model of police-community relations. News segments featured officers and community members working together, breaking down barriers that had existed for generations. One evening, as the family sat down for dinner, they received unexpected news. A major civil rights organization wanted to honor not just Senator Richardson, but the entire family for their role in catalyzing positive change in police-community relations. The award recognized that their response to trauma had created a blueprint for turning difficult experiences into opportunities for growth and understanding. The children's reactions to the news reflected their growth over the past months. Instead of focusing on the recognition, they immediately began thinking about how they could use the award ceremony to highlight other family stories and showcase the positive changes happening in communities across the country. Thomas watched his family with quiet pride. The incident that had terrified them on that beach vacation had transformed them all. His wife had become not just a senator fighting for change, but a bridge builder bringing different sides together. His children had grown from victims of circumstance to active participants in creating positive change. A local news crew, doing a follow-up story, captured a powerful moment during one of the youth council meetings. The Richardson children were leading a discussion about trust building between police and young people. Officers in the room listened intently as kids shared their hopes and fears openly. The scene perfectly illustrated how fear and mistrust could be transformed into understanding and cooperation. 6 months after the Palm Beach incident, the Richardson family found themselves back in Florida, but under very different circumstances. They were attending the opening of the first Police Community Partnership Center, a groundbreaking facility designed to bridge the gap between law enforcement and local residents. The center, funded through a combination of public and private initiatives, would serve as a blueprint for similar facilities across the nation. The morning of the opening ceremony, Michelle stood with her family at the entrance, watching as community members and police officers arrived together, many wearing the blue unity ribbons that had become a symbol of the movement. Their daughter had helped design the center's logo, two hands clasped together, representing the unity they were working to build. Inside the facility, the walls displayed photographs documenting the journey from that tense day on the beach to the present. Among them was a powerful image of Officer Cooper and the Richardson children playing basketball with local youth during one of the community outreach programs. The photograph captured exactly what the center aimed to achieve: genuine human connection beyond badges and uniforms. When we were surrounded by police cars that day, Michelle addressed the gathered crowd. "I never imagined we'd be standing here 6 months later. But sometimes, the most frightening moments in our lives become doorways to meaningful change." She paused, looking at her children who were sitting with a group of local kids they'd befriended through the youth council. "Our children taught us that the path forward isn't through anger or division, but through understanding and connection." The center featured several innovative programs that had grown from the Richardson family's experience. There was a youth mentorship program, where officers volunteered to coach sports teams and help with homework. A community dialogue room hosted regular meetings where residents and police could discuss concerns in a safe, moderated environment. Perhaps most importantly, there was a training facility where officers from around the country could learn the new community-centered approach to law enforcement. Thomas had taken lead on the educational aspects of the center. His background in teaching proved invaluable as he developed programs that helped officers understand the psychological impact of their interactions with community members, especially children. "Every traffic stop, every interaction, is a moment that can either build trust or create trauma," he explained to a group of officers in training. "We're here to learn how to consistently choose trust." The Richardson children had become instrumental in the center's youth programs. Their son had suggested creating a kids advisory board where young people could share their ideas and concerns directly with police leadership. Their daughter had started an art program where children could express their feelings about police through creativity, leading to powerful exhibitions that helped officers see themselves through young eyes. One particularly moving exhibit featured drawings from local children showing their before and after views of police officers. The before images often showed scary figures with weapons drawn, while the after pictures depicted friendly faces and helping hands. The transformation in these images reflected the real changes happening in the community. Officer Cooper had become a regular presence at the center, often sharing his story with new officers. "That day changed everything for me," he would tell them. "But what's more important is what happened after. How we all chose to turn a moment of fear into an opportunity for growth." The impact of the center was already showing in local statistics. Community complaints against officers had dropped significantly, while voluntary community police interactions had increased. More importantly, surveys showed growing trust between residents and law enforcement, especially among young people. One afternoon, a young officer approached Michelle after a training session, tears in her eyes. "I became a police officer to help people," she said. "But somewhere along the way, I started seeing threats instead of human beings. This program reminded me why I chose this career in the first place." The center also hosted regular family days where police officers would bring their own families to mingle with community members. These events helped everyone see beyond uniforms and stereotypes, creating genuine connections that lasted beyond the organized activities. During one such event, the Richardson children organized a storytelling session where both officers and community members shared personal experiences. The stories ranged from funny to touching to challenging, but each one helped build bridges of understanding between people who might otherwise never have connected. National media continued to cover the center's success, but what really caught attention were the personal stories emerging from the program. A local news channel ran a series called Building Bridges that highlighted the transformations happening within both the police department and the community. One segment featured a teenage boy who had once been terrified of police officers due to a traumatic experience similar to the Richardsons. Through the center's programs, he had not only overcome his fear but had decided to pursue a career in law enforcement himself, wanting to be part of the positive change he was witnessing. The success of the center led to requests from cities across the country wanting to implement similar programs. Michelle found herself traveling frequently, helping other communities establish their own partnership centers. But she always made sure to maintain the personal touch that made the original center so effective. This isn't just about building facilities or creating programs, she explained during a planning meeting for a new center. It's about creating spaces where people can see each other as human beings first. Everything else builds from that foundation. The Richardson children's involvement in the center had transformed their own trauma into a source of strength and purpose. Their initial fear had given way to understanding, and their understanding had led to action. They had become living examples of how young people could be catalysts for positive change in their communities. 1 year after the incident that changed their lives, the Richardson family stood together on the steps of the state capitol. Behind them, a diverse crowd gathered for the signing of the Community Trust and Police Accountability Act, legislation that would fundamentally change police training and community relations across the state. But this moment represented much more than just a political victory. The morning began with a community breakfast where officers and residents shared meals and stories together. The Richardson children, now confident advocates for change, moved easily between tables, facilitating conversations and sharing their own experiences. Their transformation from frightened vacation-goers to empowered changemakers was evident in every interaction. Looking back, Michelle addressed the gathered crowd, "What happened to our family could have ended as just another tragic story. Instead, it became a catalyst for real change." She gestured to the diverse group behind her, which included Officer Cooper and other police officers standing shoulder to shoulder with community members. Today isn't about passing a law. It's about acknowledging that when we choose understanding over fear, remarkable things are possible. The new legislation incorporated many elements from the successful Partnership Center model. It mandated regular community engagement programs, revised training protocols, and established civilian oversight boards that included youth representatives. But perhaps most significantly, it required all officers to participate in immersive community experiences designed to build genuine connections with the people they served. Thomas had played a crucial role in developing the training components of the Act. His educational background, combined with their family's experience, helped create programs that went beyond superficial diversity training to address the deep-seated biases and fears that often led to tragic confrontations. Their daughter, now speaking confidently at community events, shared her perspective during the ceremony. "A year ago, I was scared of police officers," she admitted to the crowd. "But now I understand that change happens when we're brave enough to talk to each other and really listen. Fear can turn into friendship if we give it a chance." The impact of their work had spread far beyond their state. Police departments nationwide were adopting elements of what had become known as the Richardson approach. The blue unity ribbons, started by their daughter, had become a national symbol of police-community partnership, worn by officers and citizens alike. Officer Cooper, who had become a close friend of the family, stood at the podium to share his own journey. "That day on the beach could have been just another mistake, another statistic," he reflected. "Instead, it taught all of us, that real police work isn't about power or control. It's about protecting and serving our community in a way that builds trust rather than fear." The ceremony included a powerful moment when several families who had experienced similar incidents shared their stories. But unlike the past, these stories now came with resolutions, examples of how the new approach to policing had helped heal old wounds and prevent new ones from forming. The Richardson son had developed a particular interest in technology's role in police reform. He worked with a team to create a youth-friendly app that helped kids understand their rights while also building positive relationships with local law enforcement. The app had already been adopted by several major cities. As the formal ceremony concluded, the family took a quiet moment together away from the crowds. The day's events included the announcement of a national initiative to establish partnership centers in every major city. Private foundations, impressed by the success of the original center, had pledged significant funding to support the expansion. Each center would maintain the core principles of community engagement while adapting to local needs and cultures. Later that afternoon, at a community celebration in the park, officers and residents came together for food, music, and conversation. The Richardson children joined a pickup basketball game where kids and cops played together, their laughter and friendly competition embodying the spirit of the changes they'd helped create. A local artist had created a mural depicting the journey from that tense day on the beach to the present moment of celebration. The image showed hands of different colors joined together, with the words, "From Fear to Understanding," written beneath. The mural would be replicated in partnership centers across the country. As evening approached, Michelle watched her children playing with a diverse group of young people, including Officer Cooper's daughter. The scene was a far cry from the tension-filled moment a year ago when they'd been surrounded by police cars. "This is what real change looks like," she whispered to Thomas. The family had received countless awards and recognition over the past year, but they understood that the real measure of their success wasn't in accolades. It was in the daily interactions between police and communities, in the growing trust replacing old fears, and in the new generation learning to see beyond stereotypes and prejudices. Their experience had sparked a movement, but more importantly, it had shown that positive change was possible when people chose understanding over division. The Richardson family's story had become more than a cautionary tale about racial profiling. It had become a blueprint for transforming communities through dialogue, understanding, and purposeful action. As the sun set on this historic day, the family gathered for a quiet dinner at home. Their conversation wasn't about legislation or programs, but about the personal journeys they'd all experienced. They had learned that real change starts with individual choices, the choice to speak up, to listen, to understand, and to work together for something better. The Richardson family's vacation nightmare had transformed into a nationwide awakening, proving that even the most frightening moments could become catalysts for positive change when met with courage, wisdom, and a commitment to understanding.